Back in the mix. Doug Harris with us live from Berkeley, California. Man, one of the things about brothers from the Bay, sisters from the Bay, always ahead of the curve. Everybody always has so much flavor and swagger. San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, Sacramento. You just always want to be cool like cats who come out of the Bay. Doug Harris is no exception, right? Brother Doug out here doing it on multiple levels. Doug Harris, this go round with us live from Berkeley, California. Intimate conversations, inspiring reflections. It's 99.3 FM, KJBU, rhythmofthecoast.com studios, the broadcast location. Thank you so much, everybody around the globe, for the privilege, because without you, we ain't got nothing. Brother Doug, transitioning from devoting your life to basketball, first as an athlete, then you go into the coaching ranks, but then you begin to transition in a way that is really, really unique to what you go on to do as a documentarian. You work with Athletes United for Peace, AUP. After you play internationally, again, we shared with the audience total of 5 countries, a different country each year for a 5-year period. When you come back stateside and you transition from playing professionally on an international level, you complete your undergraduate studies, then you go to grad school. And as you complete grad school, you work with AUP as an executive director with Athletes United for Peace, and you incorporate the multimedia school skills that you acquired during your time in grad school, and you teach the athletes who are on the teams that you're coaching and that you're directing, you teach them multimedia skills in a way where, as they were playing, they're also able to learn some life skills, enrichment, ingredients, where you teach them about how to do things on the court, but off the court, you also help take them to another level as people. And that ends up being something that allows you to further explore the work that you would go on to do in the Bay Area, in the community, as an outreach worker and as an educator, and as someone who now has had decades of experience working in these fields, which helped to further inform the documentary filmmaker that you would go on to become. Backtrack a bit for us to those days when you're transitioning from playing pro ball to going back and finishing your educational pursuits, and then deciding that you would work with organizations like AUP, Athletes United for Peace.
Well, when I came back home, when I finally decided to give basketball up, and I came back home to the United States, I had the harsh awakening of having to work, as a truck driver, working in warehouses, even did some custodial work up at UC Berkeley. And, I decided that wasn't what I really wanted to do in life. And I knew in order to, be in a position to do some of the things that I really wanted to do, that it would be important for me to go back to school and get my degree. And so I got connected with a degree completion program that was fresh. It was brand new. It was just starting off over at a small college in San Francisco, which was called New College of California. And this was a program specifically designed for working individuals who could go back to school in the evenings and at nighttime and finish up and get their BA degrees in the School of Humanities. And so me and a number of my friends that were also former players in college and professional who fell short of getting their degrees, we all decided that, hey, let's give this a shot and let's check it out and see what's going on with it. And so we all went through the program and got our BA degrees and we graduated. And at the time, I served as an assistant basketball coach for the program while I was, finishing up my senior year. And the head coach quit. And so the administration asked me to take over as the coach. And they told me that after I graduated that I would have an opportunity to become the coach of the program. And so everything worked out. And that's where I was actually introduced to Athletes United for Peace. And so, I put together a basketball, an NCAA Division I exhibition basketball team through Athletes United for Peace, where we played a college preseason schedule. And so that really kind of took things off and helped me get into the coaching world with basketball. So I kind of like transitioned from playing basketball to going back to school and finishing up my degree and coaching at the same time and earning some money. And so that all kind of translated into once I graduated to getting a full-time position working in San Francisco and then transitioning over to the city of Richmond. So I was really a busy person during this transition period, coming out of playing sports to coaching sports and into also going into, a professional career in human services. So, that's one of the really tough things that a lot of young people have making that transition. And a lot of the work that we did at New College involved me not only recruiting players to come and play for our team, but more importantly, encouraging young men to be able to come back to school and finish their degrees, using myself as an example of how it could springboard into other things. And I was able to really help out, dozens and dozens of young men to take advantage of that opportunity, to come back and get their degrees and further their careers and help them achieve some of their goals that they had in life, similar to myself. And, when you're working with young people, the best example that you can show people is yourself. And that's one of the things that I really worked hard at doing, using myself as an example of what you can do and how you can do it. And let's make it happen. That's kind of like been my attitude about the whole transition from sports to life.
Your willingness to share this portion of your journey is so significant because you are attaching a real experience to being a superstar athlete and then really a short time later experiencing the other side of stardom, if you will, mentioning the truck driving, mentioning the custodial work, and mentioning grinding to complete your undergraduate education, then coaching. This is instructional for those who are interested in achieving their goals, whether they are related to sports or not. But in our culture, sports is so celebrated almost to the point where I think many could argue that we overdo it as a culture a bit, celebrating too much sports, but then not acknowledging, okay, but what's the rest of it? What happens to one's humanity when that's not a part of one's journey any longer? And so what you have accomplished is, if you will, an instructional aid by how we can teach our children what's possible, as you were just sharing, what you were alluding to, like here's one way, or here are a few ways that you can move beyond sports, and the sports activities become an asset rather than a liability for one's development. That's inspirational, man. We would be remiss if we didn't note that your work with Athletes United for Peace as the executive director, and your work as a coach. AUP received non governmental organization status with the United Nations. So on a global scale, what you did really had an impact, not just domestically, but around the world. And if we don't mention that part, we leave out the notion that our children can do things on a global scale, that we needn't limit what our children are doing, regardless of what their interests are, to a local neighborhood, to the city, to the state, to the nation, that it is global in scope. And you have lived that. You're the personification of that. So your journey is inspiring on so many different levels, man. So thank you for taking a few moments just to share that with us. He is Doug Harris, joining us live from Berkeley, California, the virtual premiere event. We had the virtual premiere for Doug Harris's movie on the great UZIKEE, Alan UZIKEE Nelson. We're taking these moments to learn a little bit more about Doug Harris, so that as we get into the film UZIKEE, you know the spirit and the journey in a more intimate way about the person behind what is showcased in UZIKEE. And remember, Doug Harris, with the project UZIKEE, is putting on Front Street the genius of his uncle, where he was born, the various places where he lived, and how did he manifest what has become arguably some of the most notable pieces of art in the nation's capital. And because his works are showcased throughout the nation's capital, that automatically qualifies these works as gems for the world. So when people come from different parts of the world and they visit Washington, D.C., they are able to experience the brilliance and the genius of Alan UZIKEE Nelson. So how about, Brother Doug, look, man, look, bruh, look. Get you something to sip on, because when we come back on the other side, we're going to learn a couple more things about you, and then we're going full court on UZIKEE. Like I ain't got no defense, but we're going full court press on UZIKEE, man. A little bit more about you, and then we're going full court press on UZIKEE. Shout out to everybody in the DMV, Washington, D.C., Belmont, we see you. All right, celebrating the virtual premiere of Doug Harris's UZIKEE, Washington, D.C.'s Ancestral Sculptor. After this, more on the other side. 99.3 FM, KJBU, rhythmofthecoast.com studios, the broadcast location, inspiring you to be your best you. Doug Harris, UZIKEE, the virtual premiere event. For more information about Doug Harris, for you to take a peek at the virtual movie theater, go to DougHarrisMedia.com. 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 Don't get lost though now, because you're gonna navigate and see some stuff and get inspired by some stuff. Stay focused on UZIKEE, Washington, D.C.'s African Ancestral Sculptor extraordinaire, right? UZIKEE, executive produced by Gloria E. Nelson, producer, director, editor, Doug Harris, cinematographer and assistant editor, Douglas Harris Jr., Doug's son. So, Brother D, a few more moments with you about your personal journey as we get ready to focus exclusively on our brother Alan UZIKEE Nelson. Your transition to another level of greatness, you go from focusing exclusively on hoop, and you max out your career as an athlete, then you transition to other facets of your life, going back, getting your education, figuring out a way to make a way for yourself in terms of your work history, and then you find your way really with a passion for working in the field of human services, which also includes your coaching and continuing to be closely associated with the game of basketball. As you began to determine the marriage between your passion for human services work and tying athletics into that, along with discovering that you could also further explore your love for history and media, creating pieces of work that allowed you to kind of do a little bit of all the things that you love. Share with us how you ultimately arrived at making your first, if you will, quote, documentary that kind of changed it all for you. That just like this particular experience and project for you was the one, and from that point forward, the rest, as they say, is history.
I would have to say, when I was in graduate school, a big part of my master's thesis was the argument of the importance of producing documentary film before a feature film when you're covering the subject of an historical figure. And the person that I wanted to focus on was a gentleman named Don Barksdale, who's a Berkeley legend and was my all-out hero, in particular because he was the scout for the Golden State Warriors that drafted me to the team in 1983. So basically what I did was I documented his story in all of the research surrounding his story, because his story covered sports and entertainment and media. And so when I was in graduate school, instead of doing audio recordings of the different interviews, me and a close friend, we decided that we would videotape these interviews. And then as we got into the thesis, I realized that this could maybe one day become a documentary. And so it actually was my first broadcast documentary film. And I was fortunate enough that film, it's called Bounce, the Don Barksdale story. People can view it on my website. It's under the films, one of the feature films on my website. But anyway, the documentary won a Beacon Award, which was for the best documentary film in all of cable television. And this was back in, I believe, 2008. Yeah, the film won a Beacon Award. I had never had any aspirations of this documentary winning any type of awards or anything. I just wanted to pay tribute to the man that made it possible for me to have a career in professional basketball, and that his story was so magnificent that I felt that it needed to be shared with people. And so I decided to take all of the research for my master's thesis and combine it into a very entertaining and educating documentary film about this great man's life story. And by the way, the documentary film Bounce was very instrumental in helping Don Barksdale to be inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. And so his legacy lives on. And I think the documentary Bounce had a lot to do with that. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine sent me a video clip a couple of days ago of Bill Walton sharing Don Barksdale's story right in the middle of a UCLA ESPN game broadcast. So, you know, those are examples of how, you know, when you do historical documentary films, they really take on a life after, you know, the film is aired on TV and whatnot. You know, and this is some of the things that I really enjoy about producing documentaries. It's not only that you put together a film and it's aired on television or whatever, but how that film is used after its shelf life on the airwaves is really something important for not only me, but for all documentary filmmakers to really look at. Like, what type of impact will this documentary have after it's shown? And so that's what I think is really important about doing this type of work.
You're mentioning of Don Barksdale. Just recently, USA Today had a feature on the great Don Barksdale, and many of the quotes in the piece came from your documentary. Like, you begin to read the piece and you think, wait a minute, some of this sounds familiar. Well, oh, that's from the Doug Harris piece. So what you're sharing confirms that by documenting, in this case, the great Don Barksdale's journey, you help inform those who are currently playing the game, those who are influenced by the pathway that he helped to create for current athletes to have the careers that they have. But without your documentary, there is arguably a piece of history that we don't ever get exposed to. And if we don't get exposed to the likes of what you are documenting, then it is as if Mr. Barksdale was just another cat who happened to play the game, when he was so much more. So you are using your gifts to document those who make it possible for us to really be having this conversation. He was another Renaissance figure in his own right. So, you know, you take what you highlight, but you attach the person's humanity in a particular way where everything that Doug Harris creates essentially becomes an instant teaching tool. And for that, we can't celebrate you enough. This being a Black History Month experience, the virtual premiere of UZIKEE. Another example, when you mentioned Don Barksdale, when you mentioned the likes of your work on Glenn Burke out, when you mentioned the likes of the Pete Newell story, when you mentioned basketball in the barrio, your body of work, and those are just a few, that when listeners and viewers around the globe go to dougharrismedia.com and learn more about your body of work, they will see that you are both a historian and a storyteller. And the way in which you tell your stories by way of documentary allow us to have a visit to the library without even knowing. Oh, wait a minute, did he just take me to, I think he took me to the library, but he told us we were watching a documentary. I see the setup. That's Doug Harris right there. I got it. That, he is Doug Harris, joining us live from Berkeley, California. You know the location. We'll just remind you. You're with 99.3 FM, rhythmofthecoast.com studios, KJBU, inspiring you to be your best you. It's a presentation of the worldwide Lilal Network, intimate conversations, inspiring reflections. Doug Harris is one of a kind. Berkeley, California, Richmond, California, fighting for the rights to claim him as their own. So, I mean, we just think that the best way to referee that thing is to just just acknowledge that he is a Bay Area living legend. So, hey, Brother DH, the journey leading up to creating UZIKEE, the journey leading up to creating UZIKEE is an extraordinary narrative. We're going to hop on a quick music joint, right quick, on the right quick tip. My grammar just failed all of this. I said right and quick, and I did it on purpose, and you pretended as though it was okay. Thank you, man. Thank you. Because there are English teachers around the globe that this brother just said right quick, and he meant it. So grammar police, I apologize. We're gonna play some music, cool down. On the other side, Brother Doug Harris's journey to making UZIKEE. Brother Doug Harris blessing us with another intimate conversation, inspiring reflections. It's a presentation of the Worldwide Lilal Network, broadcasting from the 99.3 FM KJBU rhythmofthecoast.com studios. Our mission, very straightforward, very simple, inspiring you to be your best you. Brother Doug Harris, celebrating the virtual premiere event of UZIKEE, a masterful work of art with so many layers to it. Brother Harris, when we see projects, whether they be documentaries, television shows, comedies, dramas, movies, whatever the case, there's a perception that a production crew got together, they did whatever needed to be done, they put the work in, they produced the project, delivered it, they moved on to the next project. Well, we know behind the scenes that things don't exactly work that way, that it's not, have a plan, execute plan, produce the results of plan, everyone come watch and experience. So in this case, for you, the extent to which you're willing to share whatever is comfortable and what you're cool with, man. Behind the scenes, getting UZIKEE done, the last decade has been a decade that has taken you in so many different directions, personally and creatively, professionally. Giving birth to UZIKEE is a movie in and of itself for you. That could be a documentary of its own. The extent to which you would like to share what the journey was for you to get the project done, and behind the scenes, some of the things you were juggling, in your personal life leading up to doing the project, and then a few moments of physically what you were working through when you actually completed the project. Take
yeah. Well, once again, Alton, I have to really thank you in terms of bringing this project out, because once my son and I completed this documentary film, we had everything set up to have 2 premieres, a premiere for our folks here in Berkeley and also a premiere in Washington, D.C. And literally maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before the Berkeley premiere of this documentary, I came down with a pancreatic attack that was so severe, it sent me straight to the hospital. And at which time I entered the hospital emergency, they put me in what's called an induced coma. And I was in a coma for 2.5, maybe 3 months. And during the time that I was in this coma, I had 3 serious bouts with death. I had heart failure, I had kidney failure, and I developed sepsis. And so, I had a 7 month stay in the hospital for 7 long months. And during that 7 month time, I couldn't eat or drink because of the condition of my pancreas. And so I was basically bedridden for 7 months. And it was during this time that, my brother in Washington, D.C., kind of saw through the premiere that they had for the film at the Smithsonian Museum, in the Anacostia Smithsonian Museum, and then my dear lovely girlfriend Angela Cox, she saw the Berkeley premiere through, and all of this in my absence, and so I wasn't able to do the type of promotion for the documentaries that I would ordinarily do, and so when I shared this documentary with you, Alton, and I explained to you that this thing had been on the shelf because of, the health situation that I was going through at the time when the film was completed, that it was really great for you to step up and to say that, number one, to take the time to watch this documentary, and then secondly, decide that, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to roll this thing out because it needs to be seen by more people than just the small audiences that saw it while I was going through a severe health crisis. And so that was a real big struggle, and once I got out of the hospital and got my life back on track, the project, the UZIKEE film, was just basically sitting on the shelf until Alton Patton came along and said, "Hey, man, we gotta roll this out, man. People need to see this." And so that's what makes today an extremely great day for me and my family. That you would step up and really see something maybe that I didn't see, because, like I say, it was pretty much on the shelf until you looked at it and saw the potential of this documentary and how important it was to roll this thing out for a 2021 Black History Month experience for people all around the country. So, I have to thank you again. I know you're interviewing me, but I have to really give you praise for making all of this possible.
Oh, that's kind of you to express, King. I'm, not worthy of such, but the privilege is ours. Black history is every day. Black history is world history. What you created allows us to be better people beyond exclusively focusing on the Black community, if you will, but humanity. So the way that you highlight Alan UZIKEE Nelson and his journey is informative for all of us. So the privilege absolutely is mine, and we just thank you for your willingness to allow the piece to be shown in this regard, and we got we got some other things cooking. The piece is UZIKEE. He's joining us live from Berkeley, California. He's a superhero. He just shared with you that he was in an induced coma for 2 to 3 months. He was bedridden in the hospital for a period of 7 months. And he's spending these precious moments with us. So this conversation is the definition of intimate, and his reflections are the definition of inspiring. So, hey, Brother D, what we gonna do is we gonna this go round, like in this moment, I'm gonna go to the locker room, get my situation all together, right? I need to gather my situation, because on the comeback, after we pause on the comeback, we going UZIKEE, bro. No, I'm talking about we going full court press DC, Tupelo, Peoria, St. Louis, DC. We going UZIKEE straight up. If I had hoop game, bro, I would suggest that we're going full court press and run the full break the whole game, but I don't have game. But since you do, that's what we're doing on the comeback. 99.3 FM KJBU rhythmofthecoast.com studios is the broadcast location. This is a presentation of the worldwide Lilal Network. It ain't important. Believe me, it ain't important. But my name is Alton, and thank you so much for taking these few moments out to kick it with us for another exclusive edition of Intimate Conversations, Inspiring Reflections. The inspiration this go-round is joining us live from Berkeley, California. Extraordinary. Superhuman. We just discovered a few moments ago that the brother, he's supernatural. That's what he is. He's supernatural. Doug Harris, executive producer. Gloria E. Nelson, producer, director, and editor on the UZIKEE piece. Doug Harris, it's a family affair. His son, Douglas Harris Jr., the cinematographer, and I think a world-class cinematographer in the making. Want to be like that brother when I grow up. You know you got cold skills when you're willing to go toe-to-toe and fight your dad straight up for your creative desires. And he's like, no, Dad, no, we need to shoot this way, Dad. No, you tripping, Dad. No, you tripping. And Dad relented, and now we have a masterpiece known as UZIKEE as a result. UZIKEE, by the way, is the uncle of documentarian Doug Harris. So indeed, it is a family affair. And the interesting thing about describing the UZIKEE project as a family affair is that he wasn't originally the focus of this project. Another focus was the motivation for the project. But as is always the case behind the scenes, creatively, things evolve to what they ultimately will become. You can start with an original idea, you can start with an original focus, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be what the actual project is about. Brother DH, originally, UZIKEE was not the focus. You were gonna pursue somebody else. Just mentioning that the original motivation was not UZIKEE. You were actually focused on another subject, but things went in a different direction. So it's amazing to think that when one watches and experiences what you were able to create with UZIKEE, that wasn't even the original idea.
My mother wanted me to my mother has always wanted me to do documentaries on other subjects other than sports. And so she dropped a documentary on me that she made me produce about Byron Rumford. And so that was her first executive production, work as an executive producer, working with me, her son. And so this next documentary that she wanted me to produce was about her cousin, whose name is Nathan Huggins. And I stepped away for a moment to get the book. Here's the book by Nathan Huggins. And Nathan Huggins was the gentleman that started the African American Studies Department at Howard University. And this is another member of our family. And my mom wanted me to do his story. He's deceased, but she wanted me to do a documentary about his legacy so that people know that he was the one from our family that started the program that we now see Henry Louis Gates, who has taken it to a whole nother level. And so this is Nathan's book, Harlem Renaissance, and the documentary was going to, cover a lot of the material that Nathan wrote in this book. And things came up, and we had to change into a different direction. And so I said, well, why don't we, instead of, trying to make this documentary happen, why don't we just do something we know we can put together? We know we can get UZIKEE, because that's a compelling story in and of itself. And so that's kind of like what happened. We switched gears, and went in a different direction. And I think that it was a solid decision for us to check in with UZIKEE and document his story, because he has such a wonderful, wonderful and inspiring story.
That's incredible. You had the nerve to go and get the book. You had the nerve to just drop on us that that basically Dr. Henry Louis Gates is functioning in the footsteps of Mr. Nathan Huggins. That's like, what does one say? I mean, that's incredible. Like, that's where you started. For most mere mortals, the bar is set high enough there. And so when that doesn't work out, you say, well, okay, I guess I'll just get, I guess my uncle will do. I mean, he's only the first person to ever do the type of art that he's created in the history of the nation's capital. Okay, that'll be a cool, I guess we'll just go with that as a second option. It's amazing, man.
You guys have to excuse me for walking away, but I thought it would, be a little more impactful if I actually, got the book and showed you the book. Okay. The Harlem Renaissance book.
Okay. So now you're okay. So we're gonna pretend like you didn't just apologize for that, please. Class is in session when Doug Harris is in the mix, and you're right. The book is called Harlem Renaissance by Nathan Huggins. Harlem Renaissance, Nathan Huggins. So, man, when you decided that your mom's brother would be the focus of the project, born 1938, Tupelo, Mississippi, Alan UZIKEE Nelson comes up in an environment in the Deep South, Jim Crow, Mississippi, with a father who's a dentist, a beautiful family, wonderful mother, great siblings, and making the best out of what comes with being in the state of Mississippi, everything across the board. But your grandfather is an extraordinary individual. Your grandmother could produce things. How did you pick a starting point with the way in which you would begin to research and develop some context for UZIKEE? Where was your starting point?
Picking up the phone and calling them up like we usually do. We talk pretty regular, maybe once, sometimes 2 or 3 times a month. But the conversations that I would have with UZIKEE were basically our pre-production meetings about his life story. And, we'd be on the phone and I'd be jotting down my notes and getting names and numbers of different people and just pretty much formulating what me and my son felt would be, a very interesting story, because, sometimes you get the adage that if you've seen one, you've seen them all, for when you're watching films or documentary films and the like. And my son and I, we wanted this film to be what we call, well, not what we, but what my son called, he wanted this to be a thinking man's documentary. And what he meant by that was that you had to really pay close attention to pick up on some of the things that happened within UZIKEE's life that, you know, you had to really hone in closely on so that you could really get the full understanding of what was happening. And those were the types of things that my son and I kind of like discussed as we actually drove across country. You know, the project started with my son and I making the decision not to fly to produce this film, but instead that we would drive across country, because that way, you know, we could drive to Peoria, we could drive to St. Louis, we could drive to DC, we could drive to New York, we could drive to New Jersey. You know, we could control things a little bit better than having to rent cars and, you know, having transportation problems and stuff like that, equipment. You know, we just hopped in the Volvo and just rolled out and just started knocking things down. And we had a great time along the way. One of the funnier parts about the journey with me and my son was we did the production work on this documentary during the summertime. And so as we were driving across country, you know, like when we'd have to stop and sleep over, there were a couple of towns that, you know, we shut it down for the drive for that day. And we would go to towns like for example, we were in Louisville, Kentucky, and we couldn't get a hotel room anywhere in Louisville, Kentucky, because at the time they were holding the AAU youth basketball tournaments. And I mean, we spent 2 hours trying to find a hotel room somewhere, and it was just lights out. It wasn't no more rooms because of this big major AAU tournament. And so me and my son, we just had to pull over to a rest stop, and we came up with the term cowboy. We got to go cowboy tonight. So we slept in the car, you know, and then when it got into the morning time, I laid out on the grass because, you know, it was nice and warm. It was summertime. So I got a couple of hours in on the grass where I could stretch out because, you know, I'm 6'8". And so trying to sleep sitting down in a car is a little difficult. But those were some of the funner moments of the journey. And me and my son, we always laugh about that. How we had to go cowboy on the trip out there. But that was our determination and our desire to get the job done and travel in a safe way. You know, you can't travel across country without getting your proper rest. And if it ain't no hotel rooms available, you got to do what you got to do.
What a beautiful experience being able to bond as a father and son, creating a work of art featuring a patriarchal figure in the family, man. That's the stuff that, I mean, we all dream of. So this project must really hold a special place in your heart as a proud father, having witnessed your son Douglas Harris Jr. really execute his craft as a cinematographer in ways where, you know, he's displaying in many ways what you've taught him, and then the ways in which he has taken what you've taught him and gone on to a level of artistry that's all his own. All of that is on display while watching the piece. That makes this something that is, one would imagine, unlike any other project that you've ever done.
My son and I, we had several creative battles during the production and post-production process of this documentary. And the way I'll describe it in as such is that this was the first time that I'd ever done a documentary film about a living subject. And so I wasn't really familiar with the whole process of following someone in their day-to-day life. You know, my productions has always been, okay, we're going to interview this historian or this sports writer, you know, or this person, you know, family member or whatever it may be, about the actual subject. And the only filming that's going to take place is the filming when we're doing the interview. Well, my son, he had the camera rolling 24/7, and I'm telling him that, man, we don't need to shoot all of this. And you know, we got into some serious heated arguments, and I finally just, okay, whatever, go ahead, do what you got to do. And had my son not, had my son listened to me, that this would have been a totally different documentary. And me as a father, you know, I had to kind of like cave in. Okay, son, we'll give it a shot, and we'll see how it turns out. Because I didn't really understand what was going on there in terms of filming, you know, my uncle in his natural element, conversing with people, you know, hanging out at the house. And for a documentary film about an actual living subject, those are the type of situations and creativity that really make for a great story. And, you know, I'm just glad that my son, you know, that he fought me on that and held truth to nail. And, you know, it really enhanced the production of our film. And I didn't realize any of this until we got into the editing studio.
That love and those battles come out in the piece. You know, the intent, his intent was for the piece to be the best that it could be. Your intent was for it to be the best that it could be. And so the combination of father and son, you know, going at it creatively to create the best piece possible, it comes out, that energy and spirit, it really does. It comes out in the piece because Brother Allen UZIKEE Nelson is a force to be reckoned with. So it makes sense that other younger family members would have that same fierceness as father and son, you know, creating a piece about his fierceness. A native of Tupelo, Mississippi, born in 1938, Tupelo's claim to fame is being the birthplace of one Elvis Presley. Statues can be seen throughout the city of Tupelo. I would submit, not that by any stretch that I'm the first person, but Tupelo should definitely have a statue or two erected to celebrate the genius of Allen UZIKEE Nelson. So looking forward to seeing that, Tupelo, putting you on notice now. It will become known as the birthplace of Allen UZIKEE Nelson now, the Ancestral Sculptor.
UZIKEE has a sculptor in Tupelo, Mississippi, and it's in honor of the high school principal at Carver, George Washington Carver High School. And so he has a big giant, it might be 20 feet. I think it's taller than any of the other sculptures in DC. But he does have a sculpture in Tupelo as well. So he got joints in both of his little towns, Peoria and Tupelo.
Okay, but you're saying that's his work. He created it.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm saying,
oh, okay.
He deserves a statue of his own.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean.
A landmark of his own that recognizes his genius and how blessed Tupelo is to be able to have the world know that his birthplace is Tupelo, Mississippi. That's what I'm saying.
Well, what I'm saying is I'm trying to work on getting me a UZIKEE sculpture that I could put up right here in front of our house here in Berkeley.
Okay, this has the makings of a family conflict. I'm staying
I'm
out there.
trying
I'm
to figure
gonna.
out I'm trying to figure out how I
Oh
can get
no.
my hands on one of them sculptures.
Hey, get that music ready, bro. Because Mr. Nelson is not gonna be calling me. Hey, you got that music ready, bro? You ready? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna let the referee come in on this. We're gonna take this music break and come back. We're gonna push and share some highlights from the documentary with you. Um, Doug Harris, live from Berkeley, California, 99.3 FM, KJBU, rhythmofthecoast.com studios. A lot of nerve, that Doug Harris. 99.3 FM, KJBU, rhythmofthecoast.com. This is another exclusive, intimate conversation, inspiring reflections episode. This go round, he is Doug Harris, the director, producer of UZIKEE, Washington's Ancestral Sculptor. Brother Doug, you hit this one out of the ballpark, man. Tupelo, Mississippi, Jim Crow South. UZIKEE is born in 1938. And the education is one where all of the brothers and sisters who grew up where he grew up during that time, the goal was to go to college. And 99% of the students who were going to school where he went to school, everybody was going to college. But in his early teen years, he ends up leaving Tupelo and the family moves to Peoria. And they go from an educational system where the teachers are Black, all of the academic instruction is provided by kings and queens of the community, all of whom are Black. And when they get to Peoria, the world is different, and the educators are white, as is highlighted in the documentary UZIKEE. And you highlight in a masterful way how the educational structure profoundly impacted what he was able to do or given access to do as a student graduating from high school, the ways in which certain systemic roadblocks could be put in one's way, and what he did to navigate around some of those challenges.
Yeah, well, through my research, when I uncovered some what I call propaganda film footage of Peoria Union High School right during the time when my uncle was going there, the footage describes a whole different scene as it relates to the academic curriculum that they provided for all their students to enrich the educational experience for the students at Peoria Union. But as my uncle tells it, that he wasn't allowed to take trigonometry. He enrolled in trigonometry and he wasn't allowed to take it because the instructors told him that he wasn't going to need trigonometry for what he was going to be doing in life. And you know, the use of that footage, the archival footage that showed, you know, that showed you what the message that they were trying to get across back in the 50s, you know, on the film footage was totally different from what was really going on at the time. And I think, you know, when you put together these different documentary films, archival footage, historical archival film footage is very important because a lot of times, such as in this film that my son and I produced, it shows the total contradiction and hypocrisy of what's really going on. Take for an example, since we're on archival footage, there was a clip that we used in the documentary that showed how these home loans were being made available for people all over the country, all people all around the country. this whole wave of home loans for people. Well, if that was true, in fact, they didn't allow my grandfather to get one of those loans that they were promoting. My grandfather had to go to a whole different town to get a loan because, as my uncle described in the film, that the banking institutions, they would give you a loan for a Lincoln or a Cadillac car, but if you was trying to buy some property, you weren't getting any action on getting any loans from lending institutions. But the archival footage that we show in the film shows that, hey, this is supposed to be available for all Americans. But in reality, the Black people were being excluded from those different opportunities. And so that's just one example of, one of the layers in this story that clearly defines racism. And one of the interesting things that I might add, getting back to my son didn't want the word racism to be used in any part of this documentary. There were two words that he didn't want used. He didn't want us to use the word racism, and he didn't want us to use the word gentrification. And one of the reasons why he didn't want to do that, because he wanted this film to kind of like just show you and break everything down without having to just, holler out those words. So a viewer could really experience what racism is like and what gentrification is like if they closely pay attention to the documentary without even hearing those words.
Yeah, an interesting editorial choice, and the fact that the two of you were able to find a happy medium about, how you would go about doing that. His perspective obviously has merits. Creatively, he had a vision for why he thought that would be effective, and then of course, stating those terms kind of speaks for itself. Had you chosen to go in that direction also. So the way that you presented in the piece is so effective. When you mentioned the notion of not being able to get a home loan, but you could get a loan for a Lincoln, in the documentary, you guys do such an effective job at highlighting the schizophrenic nature of how the system would work for the African in America. You were not able to get said home loan in Peoria, but in the piece, you clearly show that UZIKEE's father goes to Pekin, Illinois, which is a sundown town, and somehow his Blackness was all right during the day to get the same loan that he wasn't able to get in Peoria. So the schizophrenic nature of being punished for being born Black is something that's interestingly put on display in that part of the documentary. Again, to the credit of the combination of both you and your son behind the scenes and how you chose to approach that. Peoria is also interesting in the documentary when you showcase that UZIKEE's sister chooses to go against the grain where her other siblings go to Bradley University, prestigious university. But because her big brother and mentor, UZIKEE, goes to Carbondale, Illinois, and goes to Southern Illinois University, she tells Dad, no, I'm not going to where my other brothers and sisters went. I'm gonna do what UZIKEE did because he's my mentor, and I'm gonna follow his path. This is noteworthy because the instructional nature of the documentary once again rises to the surface. In that, what does it look and feel like for siblings to love each other enough to mentor one another and actually impact the choices in terms of educational pursuits, in terms of where one chooses to go geographically to pursue one's goals. The documentary gives some insight as to how tight and how respectful a rapport the two of them had for one another, for little sister to go, no, Dad, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this. And the reason I'm doing this is because my big brother made these choices and he's my mentor. We need these types of messages. We need to see that. We need to see, it is nourishing to see that. So the way in which you all highlight that regarding the Peoria aspect of the piece is just brilliant. It's just brilliant because they make these decisions in the midst of a journey where in Mississippi, 99% of their classmates were going to college. All of their educators were Black. When they get to Peoria, they're in a predominantly white educational structure where they see no Black educators. And the goals in terms of where the bar is set for one's academic achievements is lowered for us when supposedly they're entering a place that, well, the ice must be colder because we're here in a predominantly white scenario, only to discover that the real Mississippi was in Peoria. That Peoria was more of what Mississippi was supposed to have been than Mississippi was in terms of their experiences at that time. All the more reason why you've got to see UZIKEE. DougHarrisMedia.com, DougHarrisMedia.com, the location. The virtual premiere has taken place, but it's not too late for you to see it. It was just a way that it was rolled out to the universe. That's all. Just a little sprinkle of something extra, man. Peoria, Illinois, we also want to make sure that we note that is the home base and stomping grounds for the great Richard Pryor. In the piece, UZIKEE notes that there was only one place to go, George Washington Carver Center in Peoria, Illinois. And that kind of served as the launching pad for the iconic comedian Richard Pryor. And by the time UZIKEE discovers that he's been fired from his job there in Peoria, he's grateful because he feels like it's something that sets him free. The loneliness and the lack of opportunities professionally and socially, that he felt like that was his ticket out, being fired.
Well, the manner in which he got fired was really disturbing to me, and that is that UZIKEE built his first sculpture while he was working in management for the Caterpillar Corporation. And so UZIKEE is commissioned to make this first sculpture by a brother named John Gwynn, who happened to be the NCAA, the president of the NAACP for the state of Illinois. And so UZIKEE is going on the radio and doing radio interviews similar to what we're doing right now in Peoria, in Black Radio Peoria. And he's also in the newspapers, about this sculpture that he built in honor of the NAACP. And so the management at Caterpillar, they don't like UZIKEE's connection with the NAACP president, because John Gwynn, the NAACP president at the time, is trying to desegregate everything in Peoria, Illinois. And so this is causing some friction between executive management at Caterpillar and UZIKEE. And my grandfather kind of warned him that, hey, they trying to get rid of you. So you better save up your money and get ready for your next move. And basically what that all really shows me in real time today is that the cancel culture that we see today existed back in those 60s when this situation occurred with UZIKEE and Caterpillar, because the cancel culture basically grabbed a hold of him and took him out of his position because of his association and outspokenness about the desegregation of Peoria, Illinois. And you see that today, probably more so than even back then, that when people are outspoken about their beliefs about different things that aren't fair in our society, and in particular towards black men, black people, that you'll get canceled out with the quickness. And I think this documentary kind of shows that this isn't something that's new, that it's been happening for a long time. And cancel culture is a lot of times centered around media. It evolves from something that was either on the radio, something that was said in the newspaper, and then when it goes public, and then individuals that speak up are canceled out. And that's one of the things that UZIKEE experienced at a pivotal time of his life. But as you mentioned a moment earlier, that was actually his emancipation to get away from that type of environment, that type of racist environment in Peoria, Illinois. And he found a home in Washington, D.C.
Well, I think we would be, I think we would be all right using the term racism at this juncture.
Oh, definitely.
The terms modern day cancel culture. We may use updated terms. However, he was black, being outspoken, and was punished for that combination. When you add black, being African in America, to being outspoken, to your language, he was canceled. So the racism that was practiced is what he was on the receiving end of, but it didn't stop him.
No, not at all.
Because he used it as a passport to go to another level. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back as the sun gets ready to set on us here before we get to the top of the hour. We're going to share a few more highlights with the audience to get those folks who have yet to see the piece, to get them ready. Because the amazing thing about these few things that we're going to share as we get ready for the sun to set on us is that it is not possible to have a spoiler alert. Brother Harris, let's hit a few highlights as teasers for those who will be experiencing in the future the UZIKEE project. One of the areas of the piece that serves as the ultimate supplemental educational tool is King UZIKEE's exploration of how abolitionists helped some of his/your ancestors escape to freedom through the Underground Railroad, and his having a relationship with the gentleman by the name of Peter Michael, whose forefathers helped UZIKEE's ancestors on this particular Underground Railroad path. And you all take the viewers to the actual safe house site in the piece. And King UZIKEE elaborates on what the process was of him learning all of this information about his family's history.
Well, I'm going to take everything a step back. During the production while in Washington, D.C., UZIKEE took me and my son out to Virginia, where all of this took place, to the actual slave plantation, just so we could film and get a feel of the area that he was going to be speaking about. Now, the only thing that was missing when we went to Virginia, we spent the whole day in Virginia filming different places, the plantation and everything. But UZIKEE was hell-bent on taking us to see Peter Michael, who's a cast member of the film, but ZIKEE couldn't remember exactly where Peter Michael lived. And so we spent maybe an hour just driving around for him to kind of joggle his mind to figure out where Peter Michael lived, because he hadn't, been out there maybe in 2 or 3 years or so. And, I thought that it was done. It was a wrap. We weren't going to be able to get Peter Michael. But UZIKEE was so hell-bent on finding Peter's house that we drove to a fire station, and UZIKEE talked to the firemen at the fire station and asked them if they knew Peter Michael, and they got a phone book out, and they went through the phone book, pulled Peter Michael up, got his address, and we went by Peter Michael's house just on the spare, but not unannounced. And Peter Michael just welcomed us into his life and his world. UZIKEE introduced me and my son to Peter Michael and told him what we were doing, that we were doing this documentary. He had no idea about anything. It was like on a Saturday afternoon. And so Peter Michael said, well, hey, look, let's go down to the safe house. Why don't we do the interview, right there where people can see the safe house. Incredible. And when you're doing documentary films, what you set out to do doesn't always happen the way you plan. And in this case, it was an impromptu situation where we struck gold. And I think it was, because my uncle just wasn't going to give up. He was determined to find Peter Michael, because he wanted Peter Michael to be a part of his documentary story. And my uncle made it happen, man. And the folks that haven't seen the documentary yet, they'll kind of get a true feeling of what I'm talking about now when they watch the film.
As the sun begins to set on us, Brother DH, for those who have had this experience with us, right? And the question looms, why is UZIKEE relevant? What is it that he's done in Washington, D.C. that warrants a documentary? Why has he become this historic figure, this legendary figure in his own right? What are a few things that you think are important to mention for those who are going to DC sometime in the future? Where might they go? What might they be looking to see? Put into some context of why UZIKEE is so vital to the landscape of art in America, particularly ancestral sculptures in America.
Well, before we even start to talk about the art aspect of UZIKEE's life, I want to backtrack and take a moment, because I think the significance of my uncle is the fact that he was a founding professor. He was a founding engineering professor at one of the last historically Black colleges and universities in our country, which is the University of District of Columbia, and the important role that he played as a founding professor there at that institution was the fact that he helped and taught hundreds of engineering students, Black engineering students, who would then go on to help in the rebuilding of Washington, D.C. after the Martin Luther King assassination riots basically destroyed a good portion of the city. And he came in to help train a lot of our young people who took part in the actual rebuilding of that community. And I think that that's something that has to be noted, that the role that he played, you know, in engineering and teaching the necessary skills of engineering with heating, plumbing, and air conditioning, what they call HVAC, that these are the infrastructure of which buildings are remodeled and rebuilt. And a lot of that work had to be done in the District of Columbia. And UZIKEE, after he was emancipated from Peoria through the firing at Caterpillar, he was called upon to come to Washington, D.C. to be an integral part of the rebuilding of the district. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't really hone in on when they look at his life. And to me, that is probably an even bigger impact that he has had on Washington, D.C., in addition to, you know, his sculpture artwork that's sprinkled all around the city.
His transition from Washington Technical Institute and being essentially one of the forefathers of what would become the University of the District of Columbia, an HBCU, historically Black college and university, is a contribution where, to your point, the comprehensive nature of his contributions to this experiment known as America have to be taken into account, because that informs us about the person behind the artistry and how he used what he was doing as an engineer to leverage all of that to create the works of art that he went on to become famous for. That, to your point, without knowing those things about his background, one really cannot appreciate the art in its purest essence. So he's to be celebrated as a humanitarian, as an educator. He took his work as an educator and used what he was teaching his students to also introduce them to entrepreneurship, to introduce them into home ownership. So, you know, what you're mentioning really does give us more of a full circle view of the person behind the genius of the works of art that one can go experience throughout the city of Washington, D.C. And we owe you, we owe your son, we owe the vision of your mother, the great Gloria E. Nelson. We owe your entire family for bringing this experience to us. Here on 99.3 FM, KJBU, rhythmofthecoast.com studios, broadcasting this exclusive edition of the virtual movie premiere event for UZIKEE, Washington, D.C.'s Ancestral Sculptor. Doug Harris has been kind enough to take time out of his busy schedule to join us live from Berkeley, California. This has been the ultimate honor, my brother. We salute you, we celebrate you, we congratulate you. There are a number of works on the horizon that you have forthcoming. So, so this being an introduction for many around the globe to your work, this is one heck of an introduction, man. In closing, a message for your uncle Alan UZIKEE Nelson there in Washington, D.C. Any thoughts, feelings that you want to express to him by way of us letting the sun set on us so that you can get back to the lab and keep cooking? The floor is yours, King.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to thank my uncle for giving me the inspiration to tell his story, and for him as my uncle to have some of the artistic creativity and the hard fighting and desire to kind of rub off on me through our family's genes. Because in doing my uncle's story, I found that, you know, a lot of his makeup is part of who I am. And I guess it's just built into the family's DNA. But I love him, and I thank him for that.
Okay, trying to get the waterworks started in here, man. It is an experience that everyone owes it to themselves. You owe it to your families. We're moving into an age where the notion of school and education is unconventional. This is indicative of what is necessary to push the needle forward with educating our children in new, innovative ways. And so this UZIKEE project is a way that we can introduce so much to our children. And by this introduction, they have a context by which to study the Underground Railroad, by which to become more acquainted with terms like abolition. What did it mean to be an abolitionist? What did it mean to use the Underground Railroad to find one's way to freedom? You know, what does it look like to trace your family roots back in a way where you can connect the dots so that you can have a greater understanding of your family's experiences? How did your family come to be? What is your family tree? What are the dots? And based on understanding and getting more acquainted with those dots, we have an opportunity to understand ourselves better. And thanks to the Doug Harrises of the world, who have sons like Douglas Harris Jr., who have mothers like Gloria E. Nelson, who have uncles like Alan UZIKEE Nelson, we can see what's possible and how we can get there by paying attention to these documentaries like the one that you created. We all are better as a result of the experience of UZIKEE. So again, we salute you, we celebrate you, we thank you for being you. We thank you for being you. It is an honor to have had these moments with you. This intimate conversation with inspiring reflections stands in a lane all its own. In closing, I think that we can share with the audience that Vincent DeForest of the U.S. National Park Service, who is featured in the UZIKEE documentary, describes UZIKEE by quoting Senegalese ecologist Baba Diem's mantra. Quote, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. And we will understand only what we are taught." As we all move on, for those of you who are about to experience UZIKEE, Washington, D.C.'s Ancestral Sculptor, know that he loves history and he loves family, and there is no separation between the history and the family for UZIKEE. Until next go round, on behalf of Doug Harris, the super engineer Dean Childs, on behalf of the Community Advocacy Coalition family, and everyone associated with 99.3 FM, KJBU, rhythmofthecoast.com. This has been a presentation of the worldwide Lilal Network. Intimate conversations, inspiring reflections. We will get together and do it all over again very, very, very soon. Thank you for the privilege, because without you, we ain't got nothing. You make it possible.